Hey everyone, hey Joe, welcome to Coffee with Joe on
Hey,
Thursday morning, October 1st, 2009. Joe and I were at the Monetary Reform Conference last weekend in Chicago, put on by the American Monetary Institute, and there was an interesting announcement made at the conference. It's a dramatic moment. Steven Zarlenga, with a cell phone in his hand, the director of the institute, got up in front of the audience and announced that he had Representative Dennis Kucinich on the other end of the line, and that Kucinich had told him that he was going to be introducing the American Monetary Act within the next several weeks, which is big news for monetary reformers. It's the first time since the 1930s that there's even been a piece of draft legislation for a debt-free money system
right.
up for consideration. But there's other Fed legislation in the news. The Fed Transparency Act has got all kinds of over 200 sponsors on it now, I guess. Joe,
Right.
what sense are we to make of this?
Well, first of all, like you said, Peter, it's definitely an exciting time. Thanks to Ron Paul and his lengthy many years of efforts trying to do something about the Fed. Um, and right now, Pete, I've as good as I feel about Ron Paul's effort and understanding that Ron Paul's effort is coming from a different solution than what we're advocating as a solution. Ron Paul kind of taking the libertarian, side of the solution, and us kind of taking the more progressive, traditional progressive side of the solution to the money system. One of the things that really frustrates me is we have, Chairman Barney Frank of the House Banking Committee, coming out and saying, in light of Ron Paul's legislation coming forward, he wants to work out a compromise with the Fed in order to move forward. In other words, it seems to me that we have one of the most progressive politicians defending the status quo of the banking and financial system in a way that is clearly against the interests of the public and the interests of having a democratic monetary system. So, what kind of a situation is that, Pete, that we find ourselves in when a guy like Barney Frank, is saying that, well, we need to respect the independence of the Fed. The independence of the Fed. This has to really do with who is the Fed and who are we and what is the money system. The Federal Reserve Act, Mr. Frank, had the Secretary, when it was written, had the Secretary of the Treasury and the Comptroller of the Currency as members of the Federal Reserve Board. Okay? What kind of independence did they write at that time? No, this is supposed to be our money system, and we're supposed to have access to the workings of the Fed completely and fully. For a long period of time, we had that, and now they've done away with it. And now you want to defend, the secrecy of the Fed. It's a bad record when your efforts are aimed at maintaining the roadblock to transparency that we really need. We really need to have a true public money system alternative moving forward. All of a sudden now I see Mr. Barney Frank as the guy who's holding up the curtain. Don't look behind that curtain. You might see who's controlling the puppet strings behind that curtain, and find out, where the yellow brick road goes. So Barney Frank, the guy who's holding the curtain up over the Fed, get out of the way. Okay? We want to have an honest, open discourse in this country about monetary reform. And you need to go back in history and figure out, what needs to be done in order for us to have this discussion. So having said that, to me, what we need to have is a complete review of what the Fed is doing. When we talk about transparency, Pete, Mr. Bernanke, let's just say, Mr. Bernanke can come up there and say, well, we can't tell you who got that money. Imagine. Who's responsible for the financial obligations that are created by the Fed? There's a question I'll put out there to Barney Frank. Barney, do you know the answer to that question? Is that question before your committee when the Fed creates trillions of dollars of new money? United States denominated debts and lends them to corporations and foreign corporations, who's responsible ultimately for that? Is it the taxpayers of the United States? If it is, you don't mind if we have a look at what's going on, please? Are the member banks of the Federal Reserve banking system responsible for those trillions of dollars that have been created and that have gone out either to foreign corporations or to private corporations in this country? Who is ultimately responsible for it? Yes, the answer is that those are contingent liabilities as they exist to the taxpayers, and there are mechanisms by which, we end up having to, could have to make up for them. But the most important thing, I think, is the fact that our Congress knows nothing about what's going on with the monetary system and with the financial system, and that's unacceptable, Pete. That's unacceptable. That's why we need to have transparency. Ron Paul and I may disagree about what the money system should look like in the future, but we both agree that what's going on is completely unacceptable. This guy right here, Milton Friedman, he's got his book, A Program for Monetary Stability, Pete. You read up on his suggestions. Milton Friedman, the conservative Milton Friedman, has a framework right there for completely restoring what it would really be a publicly controlled monetary authority, creating the money as needed, and where are the progressives? I don't care who you are out there, Mr. Kuttner, Mr. Galbraith, even Naomi Klein. Naomi, do you know what's going on with the money system? Are you paying attention to something else? This is really important. This is what we need to do right now, today.
Interesting comments about the Fed there and who's on the hook for the Fed. And at some point, the question comes to my mind, can the Fed declare bankruptcy? I mean, what happens, when the Fed declares bankruptcy? There's an interesting question. We don't have time to go there today, Joe. Another institution in the news this week, the FDIC. We're hearing that the FDIC Fund is almost empty. What are the implications of that?